Banjo-Kazooie. The iconic collectathon from Rare refined the 3D platformer genre for a generation of gamers on the Nintendo 64, followed by an equally iconic sequel. But then, Rare's solid run of Nintendo platformers came to a halt when they were bought by Microsoft in 2002. The last entry in the franchise was 14 years ago. Sounds like it's time for a new episode of Next Game. I'm Shane.
And I'm Adam.
And welcome to Next Game,
the show where we design sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and just about anything we think's fun.
We're so happy to have you here with us today while we come up with a sequel for Banjo-Kazooie, which, by the way, is probably one of the biggest game franchises of all time for the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, it's a scary one, but maybe we should talk a little bit about what we're doing here today. We are two folks who talk about video games on YouTube, and we've been doing it for a long time. In the show, what do?
Well, we basically come up with a pitch for a video game sequel to something, and then we send that pitch off to a guest producer who will basically judge our ideas and pick a winner between us. But before we get into that, we have to ask ourselves the question we ask ourselves at the beginning of every single episode: why this game?
Banjo-Kazooie! Huge title for the Nintendo 64 in the 90s. A lot of 3D platformer collectathons around that era, but this one stands out. The series stands out.
Yeah, it really does.
A very beloved title. We had Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Tooie was the sequel. We had a couple of Game Boy Advance games. One was a racing game. One was a top-down adventure game, and we had the Xbox 360 release of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
That's correct.
Everyone's favorite banjo.
It's the best one. We'll be talking about that a little bit later.
That's the subtitle on the game. Everyone's favorite banjo.
So this is a series that I'm pretty familiar with. I've played all the games. But it's one that when I started playing the Nintendo 64, and this series did start on the Nintendo 64,
right.
It wasn't one I played a lot of at the time. So I didn't have an N64 growing up. I had a PlayStation, but you did have an N64. Yep. So what was your personal experience of this game?
Yeah, I rented this game a couple times, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't play a lot of other platformers, like 3D platformers at the time. I think I only really played a lot of like Mario 64.
Sure.
So coming off Mario 64 into this title, I could see like some very clever evolution from one to the next, but I can see how like other people might have felt that Banjo was a little long in tooth, like looking back on that era in a bubble. There was a lot of games like trying to be like Mario 64, and not all of them were as successful as advancing the formula as Banjo-Kazooie and its sequel, which ramped things up, Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, for me, this is a weird thing. So because I didn't own an N64, I did play Banjo-Kazooie, but my favorite 3D platformer at the time was Mario 64.
Sure.
Not owning the system,
yeah.
I still played it a lot at like friends' houses and stuff like that.
You go to your local, whatever, Toys R Us or whatever, and they would have kiosks there, and you just stare up at the ceiling and play it, because sometimes they would have those CRTs up there.
Yeah, so for this episode, I went back and I replayed the original Banjo-Kazooie. Now, specifically, I did play a little bit on the N64, but I played it primarily on the Xbox 360 release. So there is a new version of the game that exists. It's widescreen. I think it has a higher frame rate, or at least a much more stable frame rate. And the game still looks like an N64 game. There's no going around that, but it controls a little bit better. It feels a little bit better. It has more of a refinement to it. It's not like a remaster of the original game, but I think that is the best way to play Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie.
Well, we took two opposing ways of going back to this old title, at least the first title, because I played Banjo-Kazooie just recently on the N64 proper, with the old controller and everything. And I dabbled with Tooie on the 360. Sure. Yes, the controls are better, but not so bad. On the Nintendo 64, I found myself surprisingly enthralled with how well the game held up. Frame rate's terrible, though.
It is. But that N64 in general had that problem across the board with almost every game,
It was the birth of polygonal, like, platforming, polygonal games, really, that era. So, yeah, of course, we can let that go a little bit. But what is a Banjo-Kazooie game?
See, for me, it really is that collectathon nature. Now, I was playing a lot of collectathon games. I was playing Spyro at the time and a bunch of others. But with Banjo-Kazooie, now that I've gone back, replayed it, it really still, like you said, it really does stand out. It still feels like a very good game to this day, but it is a serious collectathon. It's not built upon combat too much. Combat's there in the game, but it really is about collecting all the little the jiggies and the musical notes and all that stuff.
Sure, yeah.
The worlds have a lot of exploration in them. There's like a main hub world, and you go to all the smaller places and stuff like that.
Yeah, in the first game in particularly, it really has that very formulaic. You're going into what is like a witch's head, and then going off into other worlds from there. We got to talk about the main characters?
Yes.
Because we haven't even mentioned yet. Of course, they are the titular characters.
So it's a bear and a bird.
Yes.
Banjo and Kazooie.
Right.
It's not like you're playing two different characters. It's one character kind of squeezed together and combined. What you do is you got the bear, and then in the backpack you've got Kazooie, and they can switch roles. Like Kazooie can like run really fast, so he kind of like, or they kind of like get Banjo on their back and run. It's so hard. Do you ever think of how confusing it is to explain?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. This is a show about pitching games.
Yeah.
Do you know how weird the pitch, the original pitch for Banjo-Kazooie probably was? Like, so the bear has a backpack and the backpack does things. Got it.
Yes.
No, the backpack's a bird.
It's messy. But that's what made the game so cool.
Yeah.
Now, we like the first game, right?
Love it.
Second game?
I don't have as much experience with the second game. I did play it quite a bit back in the day when it first came out. I think it was in the year 2000. And then just recently, I had a couple of hours with it. And on revisiting it, I didn't really remember it that well, but there's a lot more is thrown at you. In the beginning of Banjo-Tooie.
It's got a long intro cutscene too.
Yeah. Things are really stretched out. And
the animations though look really good. You ever I never realized that there was kind of like a dynamic jump between the first game and the second game, but there's a lot of character-based animations that are just subtly tweaked, but they have more emotion and stuff like that, a little bit more flowy nature to them. And that's kind of the difference between the two games. I know it's easy to say it's not that big of an experiential jump, but I think there's actually visually a little bit of gameplay mechanics. It's even more refined than the first one.
Like most of the mechanics that you could do in Banjo-Kazooie, not all of them, but most of them, they explain to you just right out of the gate in Banjo-Tooie, like within the hub area. And then they're like, okay, now here's all the new stuff. And then they build on the character really quickly. So it's almost like, yeah, you're going to learn all that. This is new. The turnaround for this game, like many games back then, was pretty quick. That's right. I think it's because they had a lot of those assets and things. And maybe because they had a lot of things already pre-built or knew how to make these things more quickly, they're able to place in just a lot more content. There's a lot more to do in Banjo-Tooie, a lot more work into the animation and all that kind of stuff. It's spit polished to a fantastic degree.
Now, those two games are iconic. Everyone knows them. Everyone's played them.
Yes.
But directly after this, they kind of left the franchise alone for a while, and then Rare ended up getting purchased by Microsoft. Now, we've done a video in the past where we've actually talked about this already, kind of the transitional nature of Rare from becoming a Nintendo house developer to a Microsoft house developer. And in that time period, they made some stuff on the Game Boy Advance.
Right. So, Rare was working on a kind of a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing called Diddy Kong Pilot for the Game Boy Advance. And halfway through, production for that was terrible, by the way. It was like years and years and years, and they're trying to like input motion controls into a Game Boy Advance title.
Sure.
Where like many of the consoles that were out there needed to be like put in under the light in a certain way so you could actually see it. Anyway, halfway through this miserable development cycle, they wound up leaving and moving on with Microsoft, having to basically eradicate any of the Nintendo property characters from that title.
Yeah.
And they wound up making not a sequel to Banjo, but a spin-off.
Yeah, right?
Banjo Pilot.
But it's not another Banjo-Kazooie game. No. Now, what happened next, Adam?
Okay, well, a little bit later, I don't have an exact year. A little bit later, they did make another Game Boy Advance game. And it was Grunty's Revenge, I believe. And that was another platformer. maybe not so much a platformer, maybe more of an adventure game. There is jumping involved.
Yes.
There is time traveling involved. But it felt a little more like a proper Banjo game, doing the best it possibly could.
Yes.
On a Game Boy Advance, but it still didn't satiate the urge. We have to collect jiggies in a 3D environment.
And this is where it's going to get rough. We got to talk about Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. So for those that don't know, stuff went wrong. What you would expect from a continuation of the mainline series of Banjo games, everyone has always quoted Banjo-Threeie. They always say Banjo-Threeie. It's the game they want. It's the sequel. I believe there might have been rumors that it was supposed to come out on the GameCube. Then there was rumors that it was going to come out on the Xbox. I remember people talking about that heavily. But then what ended up happening was we got announcement that an Xbox 360 game was coming out. Now, this was exciting for a lot of people. The problem is, what ended up coming out of that was way different than what I think anyone was expecting.
I'm not sure what the development cycle on that project was, but I figure it's got to be really interesting. I want to know the story behind this game because Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is so markedly different. It's a completely different genre.
Yeah.
It is... Correct. Fill in the gaps where
need be.
But it is a game where you're constructing vehicles with various pieces, and you're trying to accomplish kind of bite-sized missions in different worlds.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Okay. The 360 is a very powerful console at the time. If I had to understand what was going through Rare's head at the time period, was okay, the game itself is utilizing new techniques that the 360 afforded them. For example, physics. The 360 is a powerhouse. It can utilize physics in a way that the previous system simply couldn't that well. So you have a lot of physics implementation in the game. And the way that everything moves feels very, very physics-based. It doesn't feel, it feels hard.
When you
slow.
say very physics-based, I would say that this needed longer to cook. Everything feels so floaty. It kind of reminds me of when you're flipping over your warthog in the first Halo.
That's exactly what I felt like.
Every turn you do, you feel like the thing's going to flip over.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
And you could tell that even the developers probably had issues with that because there's ways to flip back over both in and outside of your vehicle. It feels so sloppy to me. You're talking about the power of the 360, and I want to say something nice about this game. It still looks beautiful.
Oh, sure.
It's a beautiful looking game, and some of the worlds you go into that seem like they're sort of constructed together out of various objects to make grass and different materials and stuff are all rendered beautifully.
Rare's kind of touch of quality is still there in aspects, but the problem is when you combine everything together, the sloppy physics makes it hard to play. The controls that you would expect to have from Banjo-Kazooie, they're completely removed from the game. Yeah. This is literally a vehicle-based crafting mechanic game that
heavily time-based as well, which some people cannot stand.
That was one of my biggest things that I just hated. You get a mission that you have to do, and then you're given a certain amount of time to complete the mission in, and if you don't do it in the right amount of time, you don't get the things you need to get out of it. It was just
it's no longer about cleverly going around levels to complete little mini games or get that jiggy that's up there. So you got to platform a certain way.
Banjo-Kazooie is about discovery.
Right.
Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is about speeding through it, right? And you don't take the time to breathe in. There are open areas, right? This is one of
there's collecting. There's collecting as well. There's collecting.
There's tons of stuff. Sure. But see, in Banjo-Kazooie, when you collect something, you just pick it up, put it in your backpack, you're good, right? That's it. Kazooie just pulls it out of Banjo's hands or whatever it is. In this game, if you find something, you got to take that thing, put it in the vehicle sometimes, and then take the vehicle somewhere else, and it's all physics-based.
Yeah, and all of it feels terrible.
It is so terribly designed that it's shocking.
What is cool about the title, and I don't know how much weight was put into this design decision or whatever, but you can approach missions in various ways. I appreciate that.
That's true,
you can, for example, shield an object you don't want to get hit by creating a craft that can do that. You know, you can approach things in different ways. I like that openness. But everything else we just spoke about is such a detriment to gameplay.
It really is. The game feels bulky and weighted, and it's so difficult to play. Now, we don't want to get into spoilers here, right?
Sure.
But what's important to understand in this game is that Gruntilda's still in the game. Like, she is still a villain.
Gruntilda, by the way, the antagonist from the series, a witch. In the first game, she wants to steal the beauty of Banjo's sister.
That's right.
Well, there's always an excuse for Gruntilda to be around.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, in Nuts and Bolts, she still remains in the game, but there is another character that's kind of leading everything. What's so insulting to me is that the game almost plays like, well, nobody likes platformers anymore, and the game is making fun of the fact that they are making fun of gaming at the same time, and it's very tongue-in-cheek. So they've introduced a character named Lord of Games, or L.O.G.
Log. I just call him Log.
So Lord of Games is like this big TV, and or whatever it is, you never really know what they are.
Computer person.
Basically says, you and Banjo-Kazooie has to face off against Gruntilda, and then whoever loses is going to have to work in my video game factory forever. And the entire time, it's making fun of video games, making fun of bad games, making fun of the choices the designers put into the video game, as if it's a joke. But it's like, we got to play through that joke.
That's always the worst. I hate when there's like a hypocritical nature to it, when they're like, oh man, well, platformers don't sell anymore. And then there's like some platforming elements in the game. It's like, well, come on, man.
Yeah.
We're not here to have our long, lengthy review of Nuts and Bolts. We could go on for hours, couldn't we?
And we probably would, and we might in some other context fashion. Somewhere else.
Today, we're going to be pitching some games.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now it's time for us to talk about the next game.
So this portion of the show is where we actually pitch the idea for our games. We're going to do a reading of a gameplay trailer, followed by 4 back-of-the-box points. Now, when you buy a video game and you flip it around, to this day, I believe, if you're buying physical media...
If you still buy physical media...
There are points on the back of most boxes, at least one, that tells you what's going on in the game, some sort of feature, something to draw you into the gameplay.
So we've recreated those from scratch. Totally unique, totally original ideas, and we hope that we can convince the producer to like one of our pitches more than the other. So, it's time, Adam, for you to share your pitch.
Do I have to?
Yes, you do.
I guess I do. A brown, fuzzy paw lifts a dusty picture frame and smears the numbers 1 and 4 into the ancient filth. It's been 14 years since Banjo and Kazooie's last adventure. If you want to call it that. The bear blubbers. Kazooie's always had Banjo's back. Pack still does. She literally walked away in it nearly a decade and a half ago. But how did they grow so distant, Shane? How did they get so far from where the fun began? Vroom! Outside Banjo's house, a screeching pillar of light rips the night clouds. In an instant, shockwaves penetrate the crust of the lands beyond. The grounds hiccup, bend, and crumble. Great mountains separate and lakes divide as the world breaks off, separating into enormous, non-uniform land puzzle pieces. Oblivious and still ugly crying over the photo frame, a soft blue glow begins to emanate from Banjo. Banjo's house jitters and quakes. Oh, what's going on? He trips. The dusty picture frame smashes to the ground, freeing an old picture of the confident, smiling bird and bear. Banjo's house settles. It's quiet. Clarp! Clarp! Ooh. 2 loud clarps echo through Banjo's disheveled hut. The door creaks and dominoes to the ground with a dust-billowing thwack, inches from Banjo's snout. A glowing red silhouette stands ready in the doorway. Then, a familiar backpack-laden bird marches forward, scoldingly. Get up, Furface! Haven't you heard? Some dolt called the Stranger thinks he can divide and conquer just about everything in the world. The glowing blue Banjo looks up from the floor, clearly baffled. A grow! A grow! A grow! We'll figure out this whole twinkle light glow thing later. You're blue, I'm red, whatever. First, we need to find the rest of my brood. Chirping chatter builds in the doorway. A giant hand made up of dozens of fluttering, bite-sized baby Kazooies waves hello. Look at all those birds, Shane.
Kazooie's been busy.
We won't be getting into that. Banjo gets to his feet and waves back at the kids. He tugs something loose from a fallen dresser and secures it around his waist. The cloud of Breagull chickadees. Breagulls are the name of the bird, by the way.
Oh.
If you didn't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the cloud of Breagull chickadees flows into the fresh fanny pack that Banjo just put around his belly. I'm with you. Time to get jiggy with it.
Oh!
The bear and birds multiple, leap into the third Banjo-Kazooie platformer. The birds are called Breagull. Banjo-Threegull, for flock's sake.
I don't even know if you can get away with that.
On YouTube, I will very delicately get away with Banjo-Threegull for flock's sake.
I was not expecting there to be more birds. I just wasn't expecting that.
So those are the 4 back of the box points. More birds. Is
that really it? For real?
No.
Okay. I hope not.
Not actually. Back of the box, number 1. Bear into birdliness action combo system. I have a problem with Banjo-Kazooie, and I have a problem with Banjo-Tooie.
Okay. Wow.
And that's that. I know. Hot take. That's that. They're fantastic games. That's not my problem. Clearly. But Banjo and Kazooie have always felt like one character to me. It's purposeful, the backpack thing, but you could clearly have one character that can just do these special moves themselves. Sure, there are some things that are very set into like a bird being a thing, and needing to do those things as a bird. But I really do feel like 90% of the time it could just be one character, and it just feels like they never really work together. So that's why I have point 1: bear into birdliness action combo system. So what I want to do here is help Banjo and Kazooie get their groove back. Get their moves from before, but I now want to implement them and grow them in such a way that you actually combo different moves, right? For example, there could be an egg spike move. We know Kazooie poots out eggs, right?
That's right, correct, yes.
From behind.
Or from the front.
Or from the front, or from the front. But if we wanted, let's say, to really spike one of those eggs hard at an enemy, the front's fine, but I would love to see something like where Banjo combines with Kazooie, maybe an egg's pooted out, and Banjo just gives it a punch.
Yeah.
Banjo's the brawler.
Okay, I
Send
get you.
it flying.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2, unlock amazing abilities with Kazooie's massive family crew.
This is what I want to know. So, how are you making use of this flock?
This flock?
Yeah. Okay.
You're unlocking new abilities with Kazooie's crew. Turns out the Estranger, the antagonist of this title, was just giving away Kazooie's kids to all the kings of the different worlds in the lands. How sad is that?
It's pretty sad.
So these kings, they're making the kids do stupid tricks just for crackers and stuff. You got to get to the end of the level, save the kids, and guess what? Well, that stupid trick that they were taught, that's something you can use within the game.
So you get new abilities from the kids.
You get new abilities from the kids.
Okay.
And I'll get into that right now. So bird murmur mode. Do you know what a bird murmur is, Shane?
No, I don't.
Bird murmurs are these mysterious gatherings of birds that will create shapes and waves, like just naturally to get away from predators or when they're like riding winds and stuff. And it just happens naturally in the world. I want to bring that into the game in some creative ways. I always want to do this in every game, and I always have to hold back from this, but I won't in this case. Let's say there's a giant robot and it's a boss. What's Banjo and Kazooie going to do to a giant robot? Probably something. They'd figure it out. But instead of having to think about it, they can bring in a bird murmur to form a giant bird kaiju to fight off the giant robot. Hey, you're just Banjo and Kazooie, right? You're watching. You're in control of this thing, but it's from your perspective up. And they're duking it out. So you can do big moves, interacting with the environment, attacking giant things, opening big things that would be hard for a tiny bird bear to open. That's point number 2.
Okay.
Point number 3. Wink and nod to past mini games.
Sure.
I want to bring back Banjo Pilot. I want to bring back Grunty's Revenge. I want to bring back Nuts and Bolts in the mini game respect. And I want to make them truncated, almost like a WarioWare style game. Where, Nuts and Bolts sucks, building things sucks, and falling over all the time sucks. But there are brief moments in that game where you're like, okay, all I have to do is move my car over there. I think I can do that. That's your 30-second chunk. All these things are for jiggies, collectibles and stuff. You'd bring in Grunty's Revenge and maybe do some gameplay there to get a jiggy as well.
I totally get that, yeah.
I don't want to stay on this point for too long. I want to move on to what I consider to be one of the bigger points. Back of the box, point number 4, character-centric adaptive worlds. Picture this. You go to one of those puzzle pieces I was talking about in the distance beyond Banjo's house. It's called Thermo World. Okay, Banjo's walking through an Arctic section. Oh, there's a jiggy! It's right over there. Oh, man. Oh, I can't get it. There's a giant block of ice right in front of me. Well, what happens when you switch over to Kazooie to walk around? Everything melts instantaneously. Everything melts, but not just that. Fire starts coming from the ground. It's a desert now. This winter landscape has, within a second of animation, melted and changed to a fiery location.
So you're switching it back and forth between different worlds.
Your different characters. And I don't want this to completely be every world from the get-go. Segments of the world, only segments, they could be large, they could be smaller, will have character-centric activation. Picture something like Sticks and Stones World, right? This is a name I came up with. A world with colored projectiles, beams, and pits that are color-coded to hurt the opposite character. Ikaruga style, baby.
Okay, I get that.
Ikaruga style.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe blue doesn't affect Banjo. Maybe it gives him health. And then if he switches over, if he switches to Kazooie, blue would hurt Kazooie.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I would love to implement this throughout levels, to have these sections. I think it would be a lot of fun being able to switch back and forth. They're going to be slightly color coded. That's where the color coding thing comes into play, because I want to tell players, hey, you're doing that regular platforming and your combo stuff and using the chickadees in that other portion of the level. But this half of the level right now, do you see how it's blue in your Banjo right now? Well, just expect that, if you switch over to Kazooie, something else is going to happen. Are you ready to do your pitch?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah?
But I'm going to warn you at the beginning, I'm going to act like Nuts and Bolts should continue from there. So I'm going to use the ending of Nuts and Bolts, and we're going to move on towards that and not ignore that game. We're going to fully utilize that game in a very fun way.
So I don't know if you can hear, but I'm pretty sure my brain's screaming right now. You'll have to update us on what that ending is, right?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of an insight on that one. Yes.
Okay. Very much anticipating what you brought to the table today now. Give me your trailer.
All right. You ready?
I hope so.
Here we go. When we last saw Banjo and Kazooie, they had just won the Lord of Games competition, leaving Gruntilda to work in their video game factory for all eternity.
So this is the Nuts and Bolts?
Yes, this is the ending to Nuts and Bolts. But the devious Gruntilda has conducted an evil plan. Mixing bits and pieces of old gaming hardware together, she creates a magical, interdimensional, transportational warp thingamajig. Meanwhile, Banjo-Kazooie are at home, surrounded by their friends and family, having a big celebration for the anniversary of Gruntilda's permanent expulsion. We're pretty sure it's been a couple of anniversaries now, maybe 14 years, just to be a little bit accurate there. When all of a sudden, a flash of light appears in the center of the home. It sparks and glows, spinning around. It gets bigger and bigger, turning into a giant hole. Banjo and Kazooie press themselves against the wall, holding on for dear life as they attempt to avoid falling into the void. They watch helplessly as all of their friends and loved ones, all of the things they own, get sucked in. They desperately try to hold onto the wall, but it's no use. The ring expands and pulls them straight in. They fly through a tunnel of bright lights, of sounds and images, some familiar, but others unknown to them. Somehow, not from the worlds that either of them know. The tunnel reaches the end, with Banjo-Kazooie flying out onto a large green field. The duo slowly get up and look around them. This place is filled with green grass, sharp-looking flowers and palm trees, rolling hills that seem to go on forever, shimmering blue water surrounding all of these waterfalls, dotting the landscape, and what's that? A loop-de-loop? Suddenly, a large portal opens in the sky, revealing everyone's favorite witch Gruntilda. I've taken the bird and bear out! They've been trapped in a world where they can't break out! She screams and laughs as the portal closes. Alone now, Banjo-Kazooie look around and seem more lost and confused than ever. But in the distance, a blue blur appears through the fields and flies towards the duo and stops dead in their tracks. We pan up from the ground to see a familiar set of red running shoes as the camera pulls up and reveals a blue hedgehog. Banjo-Kazooie Breakout. So, I think you know who the blue hedgehog is.
Yeah, I know who the blue hedgehog is. What are you doing?
Okay.
That's my first question. My second question is, how dare you?
Yes. So,
I guess that's not a question.
We are going off the narrative from the very last game.
Really?
See, this character...
I think you're going off the grid.
Lord of...
You're going out of your mind.
Lord of Games, right? That was Log. That was the character that we saw.
Yeah.
Log. So
right,
his whole thing was that he knew the entire world of video games, and because Gruntilda is stuck in this factory, she has to find a way out. So she has to trap the bird and bear. So here's the entire concept. We're not keeping Banjo-Kazooie locked in the restrictions of the world that we've always seen. They're going into different video game worlds. This is the idea. It's been 14 years. Not everyone remembers these characters anymore, but they have been playing other games. Now, because Rare is owned by Microsoft, Rare has an entire access pool of a whole bunch of IPs that they can use now.
I'm not even going to say anything because I think you're going to go there.
So, feature number 1.
You can't just make a game and say it's every game.
Hold on. Feature number 1, travel to other game worlds.
Okay.
So this is important. Every game world we go to is kind of infected by what Gruntilda has done. So it's not just direct representations of other game worlds. They're cartoonified. They look like they belong in the Banjo-Kazooie world.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. They've got the same aesthetic.
Yes. Right?
Okay.
So, but the layouts are very similar. So what you're going to see is the goal is you're going into all these game worlds trying to find all your friends and family, maybe even some of your household items that you really like and they care about. But what's important is the worlds you go to. The Schoolyard level from Tony Hawk Pro Skater, South Los Santos from Grand Theft Auto 5, Fallout New Vegas's Vegas Strip, the Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Fortnite World, Ukulele World. What we're doing is incorporating all of these different worlds, cartoonified and representing what you have seen in the Banjo-Kazooie universe.
So it's still going to feel very Banjo, but we're going to be incorporating in all these sort of known IP, kind of segueing these things in. Is there going to be a bit of a twist or flair with some of the mechanics from these?
There is.
Okay.
Feature 2, take the ability from other games. So when you go to these other worlds, Banjo and Kazooie can find like a chainsaw from Doom used to cut wood objects in other levels, the skateboard from Tony Hawk Pro Skater to travel faster, a cell phone from GTA 5 where they can actually check out the maps so they can see where all the hidden items are. The concept is that tiny little bits and pieces from the other game worlds are being utilized. Now the idea really is that Banjo and Kazooie are trying to become relevant with modern gamers. So we're trying to take these things from other worlds.
This is brilliant because nuts and bolts, it's very fourth wall breaking and saying like, hey, Grab by the Ghoulie sucked. And like they're very aware of the current video game situation. So if you're bouncing off of that game, you're brilliantly continuing it.
This is what we're trying to do. All it is the world has been heavily modified to be more like what a Banjo-Kazooie world is. It's still a platformer. It's still the things you would expect, but all the levels look like the levels you would see in the other games. So for example, if we're talking about Doom, the very first level of Doom is in here, but now it looks more like a platforming level with collectibles and all that stuff. But here's the trick. Feature 3, Breakout. It's not just visiting the stages, but breaking out of them. So what we're supposed to do here is every time we explore a stage, we're breaking pieces of this stage by using elements from other worlds and other games and breaking the game open. Remember in Doom, there was like a window that you could see just at the very beginning. When you first leave the main door to the left, there's a window and you can't get out into that area. Now you can. You can break into the spaces you've typically not been able to break into before. But what's important about that is the levels you'll find, are interconnected. So the first level of Doom is connected to the second level of Doom, and it makes the levels a little bit bigger. Now, I'm not saying you have the entire world of all of the game just connected. So what we're trying to do here is incorporate a lot of visual iconography and level designs that people have seen before, but bridge them together and create unique things. Every single world stands alone by itself. So if you go to a Tony Hawk world, maybe there's a schoolyard level and it's connected to the mall or something like that. But they're not supposed to be in the Doom world. Every single world has a boss that is kind of this amalgamation of the hero from that game. And it's kind of messy and weird and obviously broken because what Gruntilda did was not okay.
So Gruntilda's corrupted the protagonists of these titles.
And you're basically just trying to rescue all your friends that were at that party at the beginning of the game. And each time you do that, you get more abilities, and it all comes to one final act where you take on Gruntilda in the factory, where she uses all these worlds' attacks and abilities to attack you, and you use all the abilities you've gained to attack her back.
Can Gruntilda call a drive-by to...
Well, the idea of Grand Theft Auto was more like just, it was technology in a city. It could be any game. It doesn't have to be that one. But
I like the Grand Theft Auto twist, but...
But now we got to talk about the big thing in the room.
Okay.
Sonic the Hedgehog. Feature number 4, special guest, Sonic the Hedgehog from the movie. This isn't the Sonic the Hedgehog we've seen in the video games. This is the Sonic the Hedgehog we've seen from the movie world. Now, the reason I'm doing this
please
is because
clarify.
We want to incorporate a different character, but I also wanted something very different, and I wanted it to kind of be unique in a way. I love the idea of co-op gameplay. It's always been something that I've been very fond of. So I wanted to see something happen where Sonic can't just run around in this world. It wouldn't make sense. This world is built for Banjo-Kazooie. So Sonic gets Tails to make a robotic backpack that replicates all the abilities that Banjo can do, so that they can run in co-op with Banjo. So you and a friend can play the games either online together, the levels together, or what you can do is play them single. But when you go to do multiplayer together, the worlds kind of expand and open up in bigger ways. Like you said, you can't go under certain like levels in Doom and stuff like that. Any of the limitations those games had no longer are there. I remember playing these games and seeing these levels and going, I wish I could go in there. I wish I could do this. Well, in this game, you're going to be able to do that stuff because in this game, it's a platformer. You're supposed to do that. So that's what the whole breakout mechanic is. And incorporating Sonic in this way basically allows people to experience these games together instead of, as largely as platformers are, single player experiences. So we're building it all together to have fun. It incorporates multiplayer online. It incorporates a bunch of different game worlds that people are familiar with. It gives a reason for everything to be happening. This game is just supposed to be a way to bring people back into platforming while giving them something they recognize, while also giving them a completely different way to explore those levels they're familiar with.
I gotta ask again, though.
Go.
Sorry to cut you off. Why movie Sonic?
Okay, I wanted to be movie Sonic because I think that the idea of these worlds kind of just being taken from place to place, Gruntilda screwed up, and she thought she was pulling from the video game world.
Okay. You had to lead with that because I was like, this is the video game world. That's not the video game.
Exactly.
She messed up.
She's messing up. She's doing something wrong, and she doesn't realize that. Yeah. And basically, the end of the game comes down to the fact that Sonic has to go back to his world to fix the glitch that's caused all this stuff. And it's because of what Gruntilda did. So our pitches are what they are.
Yes, they are.
Now we have to go...
You're terrible, man.
Now we have to go through the back of the box features one more time.
Let's do a reminder. Okay, so Adam's game, Banjo-Threegull for flock's sake. Back of the box point number 1, bear into birdliness action combo system, connecting those moves. Number 2, unlock amazing abilities with Kazooie's massive family crew. Number 3, the wink and a nod to the past minigames. And then number 4, character-centric adaptive moves.
Mine is called Banjo-Kazooie Breakout. The first feature on the back of the box is travel to every other video game world you can possibly imagine.
Just everything.
The second feature is take abilities from other video games. The third feature is to break out, where we change the world that we're visiting just a little bit. And number 4, special guest, Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah? Good? Good? This is gonna be great? I think it's gonna be great.
Violence will ensue if this game is released, but there's only one way to find out if this game's gonna be released.
That's right. And now it's time for producer notes.
Okay, it's been some time, and we finally heard back from our guest producer. Shane, who is our producer for today?
Well, our producer for today is Ant Dude from the channel of the same name. Both you and I have watched Ant Dude for years and years. We've met him in person at conventions, and I think he is the best pick for this because he is a very big fan of 3D platforming games.
So whatever Ant Dude says is law, and the loser can just go cry in the corner?
Sure, as long as I win. As long as I win, I'll agree to that.
Well, I guess we're going to have to watch and see.
Yeah. And dude, what'd you think?
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. So, like many other people out there, I am a big fan of Banjo-Kazooie. Have been since I was a kid, played it at a friend's house, and then owned it when I got older. Same with the sequel. Big fan of both of those games. They are some of the best 3D platformers of all time, especially the first one. And then the memories would just continue. Like, I bought my very first ever Xbox with the Xbox One, specifically for Rare Replay, to play the best versions of those games. Don't regret it, because then I got to play Nuts and Bolts, which I actually did enjoy. And then later on, I would play Grunty's Revenge, the Game Boy Advance game. Enjoyed that too. Banjo Pilot, not so much, but otherwise, great series. One of the best reveals for Smash Brothers was Banjo. They're now watching me at all times every single day. I really like this franchise. So first off, Adam, we have Banjo-Threegull for flock's sake. That name is incredible. I like Threegull a whole lot more than Threeie now, so now I'm going to be fantasizing about that for the rest of my life until that happens. I like that a whole lot. And then for flock's sake, I don't know if that name will get by, but it gives me big Ratchet and Clank vibes, so I'll keep my fingers crossed. But what's cool is that sort of plays into the gameplay idea as well, with all of these now, like this whole new slate of really tiny birds that can like morph into a whole bunch of different things. So there's potential there. I like that a whole lot. I do think the story, while interesting, it sounded very depressing. It sounded like Banjo was, you would just pan to him being very sad that his friend has been gone for 14 years. And while that's valid, and while Banjo-Tooie was also dark and dealt with death, kinda, doesn't sound like the tone that I would go with. Conceptually fine, but the way it's presented, I'm not sure personally. Having new moves where they sort of will bounce off of each other and show their experiences that maybe they've learned in the 14 years since they've met up, there's a lot of good potential there. Banjo-Tooie had the characters splitting up a bunch, and while they did have some pros and cons, it did feel arbitrary a lot of the times, but taking that idea and instead of scrapping it, trying to build upon it, I think there's a lot of cool potential there. So when you mentioned the dive bomb with the egg, being able to shoot the egg and then like Banjo spikes it, that's really cool. I think there's a lot of cool potential there mechanically and how the characters feel with those ideas. The world switching idea has a lot of potential too, because it would show off a lot of the graphical potential of a newer console, and that's always a big selling point. But it also reminds me of something that Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Layer did, where you would play through existing levels in 2 different ways, just off of a little switch that you would pull. So doing that in a 3D space, along with some of the character options that you have available, there's a lot of cool ideas there that would really stand out. And if we're going off of the idea of the worlds being separated into these big puzzle pieces, and you have like these big puzzle pieces floating in the sky where things can change on a moment's notice, there's a lot of cool things there where we can take ideas from previous Banjo games and evolve them. Like the minigame idea of previous Banjo games like Nuts and Bolts and Grunty's Revenge and Pilot showing up as minigames, I love it. It is perfect fan service while showing graphical advancements and, you know, technical advancements in general, while still maintaining what Banjo-Kazooie is. A lot of cool stuff. Really like these ideas. And then Shane's idea with Banjo-Kazooie Breakout. Now, the story I like a whole lot. Being able to just come right off of Nuts and Bolts and just continue on that plot. I like. The idea of everything being canon for Banjo-Kazooie, just continuing where we left off. I like that a whole lot. Grunty being in that warehouse and then still trying to break out of that. I like that. The breakout name has multiple purposes, you know, at that point. And having this big warping machine that really expands the ideas of the worlds that Banjo could travel to. Ton of potential there. So plot, I'm already sold. But the way my mind works here is that if we're gonna make Banjo a big fan service fest, after 14 years of not having anything in this franchise, more or less, I think it'd be better to focus in on the IP that are under Microsoft or under Rare, digging through Rare's past IP like Battletoads and, you know, stuff like that. Having other games like Tony Hawk in there, Grand Theft Auto, cute, would definitely lead to cool fan servicey ideas, and especially when it comes to the moveset, like you explained, you can really do some crazy things with that whole idea. But I feel like once you are hoping that the people who are playing the first Banjo-Kazooie game in a very, very long time, they have played all of these popular IP and can really recognize the set pieces that they're trying to go for in the sense of a more cartoony version in Banjo-Kazooie, I don't know if they would want to go for that. Like the whole Sonic inclusion, that's one of the bullet points on the back of the box. I think it is genius that it's Movie Sonic. There was just a glitch in the system and it's Movie Sonic instead of Game Sonic. I like that a whole lot. Having Sonic being a thing, having this other popular franchise as the thing to push another Banjo game out into the spotlight, I just don't think that super works out. You know, again, visually, it would be really cool, and Banjo was in that one Sonic racing game, so there could also be throwbacks there, so that could make a whole lot of sense. But if it's gonna be where every single world is a thing, is just a different universe from a totally different IP, I think you lose a little bit of why I'm playing a Banjo game and not just a pure fan service game, if that makes sense. But to be fair, like the idea of Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty, like being in Banjo and you have these shooting segments because Banjo-Tooie had shooting segments, that would be really funny. So there's something there. There is definitely something there. I just think some wires are getting crossed with where the potential should be and where there should be a hard stop in terms of what franchises get utilized. There's something there. I just don't know if what's being currently explained is the right way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we think this is going so far?
I am nervous because this is giving me the same Mario Kart vibes I had.
I just want to say on the books now, on the record, he said Movie Sonic's a really interesting idea. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
I'm still like, what are you thinking,
It makes sense that there's some kind of change in the system, but
I feel like his lean into the more Rare-focused IPs may have made the pitch hit a little stronger.
Which is why he likes your idea. Because see, with your idea, you're focusing so much on the originating concept of what Banjo-Kazooie is that you're not really floating far away from that. For me, these are the two different things, right?
He thinks mine's depressing, Shane.
He thinks yours is depressing, yes.
It's my life in a nutshell.
But
right
he
there.
seems to like what the game has to offer a lot more than what mine does. This is the thing, right? What you're offering is more of an original idea to expand Banjo-Kazooie. What I'm offering is the idea of taking multiple game franchises and kind of incorporating them into a world.
You're trying to reintroduce the characters to today's audience, today's gaming audience. I think you've done a pretty interesting way of doing that. You've built a pretty interesting game. So now's the moment of truth, my friend. Drum roll. We got to know, who did he pick?
All right, let's find out.
So I really liked both of these ideas for totally different reasons, but if we're going to go with the concept of what the next game in this franchise should be, the winner's got to be Adam.
Adam wins.
Don't do that because there was no shooting. It was Threegull. It was the Threegull that really sold it.
Yeah. Everyone was looking for another way to say the third Banjo-Kazooie game.
It makes sense. It got gull in it because of birds, I guess. It makes... Okay, look.
They're called Breagull. They're called Breagull.
I get it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. But I do want to hear more about why he chose that.
Yes.
So, Ant Dude, why did you choose his idea over mine?
What really settled this decision for me was Adam's ideas, I think, do a better job taking the Banjo-Kazooie ideas that we're already used to and expanding upon it in a way that sort of makes sense after a 14-year absence, while maintaining it just being a Banjo-Kazooie game. Banjo-Kazooie are stronger, their worlds are more vibrant, there's a lot more that could happen within those worlds. That is, for me, when it comes to a platformer that's been gone for a long time, I want to have this sort of sense of revisiting an old friend while also enjoying the advancements that have been made in the last 14 years or so. Shane's idea is very, very cool. I'm not going to deny the whole idea of this big crossover experience to be something that is potentially magical, but if it's after 14, 15 years, we have to use Sonic as the means to push another Banjo game into existence, that I'm not super into. I apologize. Maybe after Banjo gets reestablished into the world, we could do something there. But even then, the thought that happens in the back of my head is this big crossover thing. That sort of seems like something that'd be more befitting of Conker than it would for Banjo. Especially if Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty is involved. I think the potential's a lot grander for that franchise to do the crossover idea instead. But as it stands, yeah, both ideas, very good for totally different purposes. But Adam, you take the win on this one. Sorry, Shane.
Yep, I completely agree with him. He made a lot of sense in the way that he was describing the ideas. And to be fair, if I really, really have to consider it, I do like your idea more than mine.
But your idea was ever so brave. You put on the armor. You ran out there and said, I'm going to continue from where Nuts and Bolts left off. Something very difficult to do.
Brave.
Brave.
Brave. That's what you call taking Sonic the Hedgehog and going, oh, let's just use this IP to keep people interested.
Banjo? No? Well, what about this guy?
Hey, you don't know this guy from the video games? How about the movie version? You know what? Look, yours is a true sequel to Banjo-Kazooie. Mine is a sequel to a game that not many people actually liked in the first place. That's what it is.
Well, I like your game, Shane.
Oh, thank you, Adam. But folks, we want to thank you so much for having listened to the show and watching. It means a lot to us.
And a massive thank you to Ant Dude for being the guest producer on this episode.
If you've never checked out his stuff before, please head over to his YouTube channel. That's easy to find. Just type in Ant Dude on the search bar, and you'll find a whole bunch of awesome videos about classic and modern video games.
And do you have your own ideas for the sequels that we've spoken about on this show? Let us know. Those ideas might be featured on a future episode.
Just leave your concepts down below in the comments of the YouTube version of this show, or head over to Apple Podcasts if you're listening on there and send one in through the review section.
Well, Shane, I think that just about wraps it up.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go back and replay those Banjo-Kazooie games again.
You should. You got to do your homework, and your homework includes Detention, which is basically playing through Nuts and Bolts one more time.
You know, Ant Dude seemed to really like the GBA game, and I didn't play that enough, so I think I'm going to have to go back and actually just play that beginning to end, because if he says it's a really good game and I missed it...
There you go.
Yeah, that's probably what's gonna be.
I guess Banjo Pilot is something that you can fly over.
Yeah, no, I played that one. Okay. I played enough of that one.
We know.
Well, folks, we'll see you next game.